Why you keep chasing people who pull away. Have you ever noticed that the moment someone starts pulling away from you, you suddenly want them more? When they were available, you liked them. But when their messages became shorter, when they stopped reaching out, when you felt them becoming emotionally distant, something changed. You started thinking about them more, checking your phone more, replaying conversations, wondering what you did wrong. And suddenly, getting them back started to feel incredibly important. So why does this happen? Why can someone become more desirable precisely when they give us less? The answer may have less to do with how much you love them, and more to do with what their distance activates inside you. Psychologists who study attachment have found that human beings don't just form relationships. We develop systems for maintaining emotional connection. And when that connection feels threatened, some people's attachment systems become highly activated. This is one of the central ideas explored in Attached Times by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. People with more anxious attachment tendencies tend to be especially sensitive to signs of emotional distance, a delayed message, a change in tone, less affection, less reassurance, a partner suddenly needing space. Things that another person might barely notice can feel enormously significant. And once that attachment system becomes activated, your attention begins narrowing around one question. Are they leaving me? That's when something strange happens. You don't necessarily become more compatible with this person. You don't suddenly share more values. They haven't become kinder. They haven't become more emotionally available. In fact, objectively, they may be giving you less. But subjectively, you want them more. Why? Because your brain is no longer simply enjoying the relationship. It's trying to restore security. You're not only chasing the person, you're chasing the feeling of being safe with them again. Think about what happens when someone pulls away. At first, there's uncertainty, then anxiety. You wonder whether they're losing interest. You become hyper-aware of everything they do, and eventually, maybe they text you. Maybe they suddenly become affectionate again. Maybe they say, "I've been thinking about you." And notice what happens inside you. Relief. The anxiety disappears. The relationship suddenly feels incredible again. And that emotional contrast can be powerful. You went from uncertainty to reassurance, from fear to relief, from feeling unwanted to feeling chosen again. And because the relief is so intense, it's easy to interpret that intensity as evidence of love. You think, I must really love this person. But sometimes, what you're experiencing isn't simply love. It's the relief of an activated attachment system finally being soothed. And that's an important distinction. You may not be chasing the person. You may be chasing the relief you feel when they finally come back. Number. This is where the anxious-avoidant dynamic begins. Psychologists call this an anxious-avoidant dynamic. One person becomes uncomfortable with distance. The other becomes uncomfortable with too much closeness. So when distance appears, the anxious person moves closer. They text more, ask what's wrong, seek reassurance, try harder. But that increased pursuit can make the more avoidant person feel pressured, so they move further away, which makes the anxious person even more afraid. So they pursue even harder. And now you have a loop. They pull away. You become anxious. You pursue. They feel pressure. They pull away further. Your anxiety increases. The relationship becomes incredibly intense. But here's the uncomfortable part. Intensity doesn't necessarily mean intimacy. Sometimes intensity is simply what happens when two people's attachment strategies continuously activate each other. Why do you think about them constantly? This also explains something many people misunderstand. If this relationship isn't good for me, why can't I stop thinking about them? Because uncertainty is extraordinarily good at capturing attention. When something is resolved, your brain can move on. When something remains uncertain, your mind keeps returning to it. Does she still like me? Why hasn't he replied? Did I say something wrong? Are we still together? Will they come back? Your brain keeps trying to solve the uncertainty. That's why you can spend an entire day thinking about someone who barely spent 5 minutes thinking about you, not because they're necessarily extraordinary, but because the situation is unresolved. And every once in a while, they give you something, a message, a compliment, a great night together, a sudden burst of affection, just enough reassurance to make you think, maybe everything is okay again. And then they pull away. The uncertainty returns, and the cycle begins again. That unpredictability can make your attention incredibly difficult to disengage. So here's one of the most important ideas in this entire video. Obsessing over someone is not proof that they're right for you. Your level of preoccupation tells you how activated you are. It does not automatically tell you how compatible you are. Why stable people can sometimes feel boring. This creates another problem. Imagine meeting someone who doesn't play this game. They text when they say they will. They tell you how they feel. They're emotionally available. They don't disappear for 3 days and suddenly return with intense affection. You don't have to decode them. You don't have to earn their attention. You don't spend your evenings wondering whether they're losing interest. And strangely, you might think, something's missing. There's no emotional roller coaster, no enormous highs, no terrifying lows, no dramatic reunion after days of uncertainty. So you may conclude, there's no chemistry, but be careful. Because sometimes what you're calling chemistry is actually activation. And what you're calling boredom is simply emotional stability. Peace can feel boring when chaos is what taught you to recognize love. That doesn't mean every calm relationship is a good relationship. And it doesn't mean attraction doesn't matter. It means emotional intensity alone is a terrible way to measure relationship quality. A better question is, how consistently does this person show up? Why do you chase harder when they pull away? Now we can answer the original question directly. You may keep chasing people who pull away because their distance activates your attachment system. That activation creates anxiety. Anxiety increases your attention toward them. You pursue reassurance. When they eventually reconnect, the anxiety temporarily disappears. That relief feels powerful. And over time, you may begin confusing the cycle of anxiety and relief with deep romantic connection. That's why the person can seem more valuable when they're unavailable. Nothing about their character necessarily improved. Your emotional state changed. And once you understand that, you can begin asking a completely different question. Instead of, why do I want them so badly? Ask, would I want this person this badly if I felt completely secure? That's a much harder question. But it's often a much more useful one. How do you break the cycle? The first step isn't forcing yourself to stop caring. It's learning to distinguish attraction from activation. The next time someone pulls away and you suddenly feel an overwhelming urge to chase them, don't immediately ask, how do I get them back? Ask, what changed? Did the person suddenly become more compatible with you? Did they suddenly demonstrate better values? Did they suddenly become a better partner? Or did they simply become less available? Then ask yourself, if this person had treated me consistently from the beginning, would I feel this same level of obsession? And finally, do I actually want this relationship? Or do I want the anxiety to stop? Those questions create a little distance between the emotion you're experiencing and the meaning you're assigning to it. Because the goal isn't to become cold. The goal isn't to stop needing people. And the lesson of attachment theory isn't that anxious people should become completely independent. Human beings need connection. The goal is to stop using emotional intensity as your primary evidence that a relationship matters. Instead of asking, "How strongly do I feel?" start asking, "How consistently am I treated? Does this person communicate? Do they make room for your needs? Can you express vulnerability without constantly fearing they'll disappear? Do their words and behavior generally match? Can conflict happen without the entire relationship feeling threatened?" Those questions tell you much more about the quality of a relationship than butterflies ever will. Because healthy intimacy isn't built by repeatedly losing someone and getting them back. It's built through enough consistency that you no longer have to wonder whether they're there. And maybe that's the hardest thing to understand when you're caught in this pattern. The person who makes you feel the most may not be the person who loves you the best. Sometimes the relationship feels powerful precisely because you're constantly afraid of losing it. So the next time someone pulls away and every part of you wants to chase, remember, the feeling is real. But the story you attach to that feeling may not be. You don't have to interpret anxiety as chemistry. You don't have to interpret uncertainty as passion. And you don't have to earn intimacy by convincing someone to stay. Sometimes the most important question isn't, "How do I make them come back?" It's, "Why does their distance make me abandon myself?" And once you can answer that, you may finally stop chasing people who keep running away.